distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
Welcome to this week's episode of Make It Plain. As always, thanks for listening, thanks for watching if you are watching on YouTube, and please do remember to like and subscribe, it does help, and thank you for all the support. Today we're going to have an interview with, actually very blessed to have an interview with best-selling author Yomi Adegoke, who just published The List recently. Really excellent book, The List. It talks about social media, relationships, sexual harassment and abuse in the media industry. Honestly, a fantastic read. Okay, I told you I don't really read that much no more, but I listened to it. I think I listened to it in like a day. One of those books which I couldn't put down, couldn't take out my headphones, whatever, however you want to put it. Yomi also wrote Slay in Your Lane previously, and The List has been a really massive success, huge successful book. And also she announced that she's going to be a TV show in America, HBO, and in the BBC. So really good. Please do listen to the interview. If you are watching on YouTube, that interview, we only have audio, so you have to go to Make It Plain podcast, listen to the audio that you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find that audio on there. And so please do take the time to check that out. It's an excellent interview, and we're very lucky to have Yomi Adegoke on the pod. So before that, I'm going to give you, it is, if I look a bit tired today, it is because we are in the middle of Black Employment Month, or Reparations Month as we call it, where companies will call you up and say, yo, do you want to make some money talking about black stuff? So this month is always quite the hectic month because of that. So yeah, hence the tiredness. But it is also Black Employment Month in the UK, and so I figured as an intro we'd do a bit of history. Let's do a bit of black history, with a reminder and a reminder that black history is just history. And when I give you the example I'm going to give you in a bit, this will hopefully make lots and lots of sense. But before that, just had to make a slight aside, because I've been telling you for last several months, Kemi Badenoch is going to be the next British Prime Minister. I'm only going to put a caveat on this. It's definitely possible that Keir Starmer don't last all the way to the end. So let's say Kemi Badenoch is going to be the next non-Labour Prime Minister. If you can put a bet on, find a book, you put a bet on this, it's going to happen. She's in the top 2 now of the Tory leadership contest, going to the membership, and I keep getting tweets saying, no way, she's not gonna win. Look what happened last time. They put Rishi Sunak was up against the lettuce woman, Liz Truss, I couldn't remember her name, and they voted for her. They're gonna do this again. Oh, this is different. Kemi is of a different order. Rishi was just brown. He ain't really into the whole anti-wokeness. He ain't really shilling for white supremacy too hard. Like, he'll do it in the background, but he ain't one of them that's come out with all this nonsense. Kemi has laid the foundations. They love Kemi. She's gonna win by a landslide. Yo, she's the kind of black you want. I said last podcast, you want anti-blackness, go find Kemi Badenoch. All these reform right-wingers lap that up, and because she's black, she can do it better, right? She can play that dance more than anybody. So can't here, she's gonna win, and she's gonna win the next election, and we're gonna have the first black prime minister, and it's gonna be great. I know. First black prime minister being Kemi Badenoch. I mean, that, if nothing tells you that diversity ain't the solution, then that, I don't know what it is. Anyway, like I said, that was on the side. We'll talk about that more as it progresses. But today, the thing I wanted to start with and then lead out is there was news about the Chagos Islands. Chagos Islands is a small collection of islands just off Mauritius. So if you think about Africa, southeast, I want to say, Southeast Africa. There's Mauritius, and then you have about 800 miles, so they really are quite remote. You have the Chagos Islands. Chagos Islands have now, it's just been, David Lammy just announced that they're going to be returned to Mauritius, right? I mean, you might want to ask the question, why on earth does Britain have control of the Chagos Islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean, miles away, not here? Weren't we told the British Empire was ended? Turns out it's not the case. British Empire still exists, actually exists, not just like politically, economically exists, actually factually exists, with control over places like Chagos Islands, Gibraltar, Bermuda. There's like 15 other places around the world that Britain actually controlled, right? But now they've been returned. There was a bit of dispute, return of the Chagos Islands. Robert Jenrick, who is opposition to Kemi in the Tory leadership context. Not happy, even though, by the way, put out Conservatives actually started to negotiate this deal previously. He's not happy, frothing at the mouth. The right wingers are frothing at the mouth because what did they say? They said that, I'm trying to get the quote here, I got it up. Jenrick used to be immigration minister for that racist government. Tells you all you need to know about this dude. It said, whose interests does he think he serves? Talking about David Lammy. Those are the global diplomatic elite or of the British people and our national interest. Apparently, it's in our national interest to keep hold of these islands. And the reason why is because there's a military base on the islands, US, UK military base, and they didn't want to give up the military base. You know, China might get the military base. This does also tell you something about British Empire. Still there, the military base is still there. And guess what's still there after the Chagos Islands have been returned? The military base. Ain't gone nowhere. So actually, this is perfect. If you want the history of the British Empire and the decline of the British Empire, this is what happens. And we had this because last week on the pod, I was drawing this contrast between Portugal. How does Portugal get away with being such a terrible? I mean, Portugal's OG slavery, colonialism. Portugal into the 70s was like armed struggle, really trying to oppress. They had to have like actual armed, like military armed struggle with Portuguese troops in Angola, in Mozambique, in Cape Verde, in Guinea-Bissau. Anyway, they were Portuguese. They didn't go. They didn't just go. They went violently. So it's really strange that Portugal's kind of missed out on a lot of the anti-colonial feeling, the racist feeling. But whereas Britain, on the other side, you know, there was definitely armed struggle against Britain, and there was resistance. Kenya, with the Mau Mau uprising, Zimbabwe, obviously there was armed struggle. But generally, what Britain does is what they did in the Chagos Islands. There's some resistance, there's some pushback, and then they leave. They go, oh, okay, we're gone. India happened, Nigeria, Ghana, Caribbean, they're gone. They just kind of go, yeah, go. Well, and this was not a compliment. When I was saying this contrast, violently won't let go versus let's just sit back and we'll withdraw. That was not a compliment to Britain. That doesn't make Britain any better, because this is what Britain tends to do in their empire. They just tended to pretend to withdraw, but actually everything they wanted to keep, they kept. Chagos Islands is a perfect example. The only reason that the Britain wanted Chagos Islands was their base. They're not making any money off it. It wasn't profitable. It was the base. And guess what? They still have the base. And this is what happens. Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, they leave, but they keep what they want. They keep the economic influence. They keep the money flow. They keep the industry. They keep taking. And so it still remains intact, right? And that's the thing about the British Empire. It still remains intact. It may not be politically there. It may not own it, but the things they want, they still have. That's far more insidious in many ways. That's far more. That's the Malcolm talks about the wolf and the fox. The wolf was Portugal, arms like troops. We want to keep this place. Britain was the fox. Yeah, bit of resistance. We'll make it feel like you're independent, but you're not independent at all. And that's what we have with the Chagos Islands. So the thing around the history, element of history I wanted to point out here was to talk about the British Empire, because we really don't talk about the British Empire enough. When we do talk about the British Empire, we tend to talk about it in these soft tones, and there tends to be debates. I mean, I've been in a number of these debates about the British Empire. Was the British Empire a good thing or a bad thing? I think they still ask this question in like GCSEs, and when they talk about history, was it a good or a bad thing? What was the impact? Positive? There's so many of these empire apologists, people like there's a terrible book. I mean, I call it a book. It's basically this propaganda screed by Niall Ferguson. I don't know, whatever the guy's name is. I mean, the book was so bad I was listening to the book and almost drove off the road laughing because it was so stupid. Like, you think this book is a really popular book called, I think it's called Empire. I wouldn't say it's called Empire. And you think it must have must be some sense to it because it's so popular. Oh my days, you don't need sense with these books. Psychosis all the way. Making these arguments that Britain was wonderful, Britain was great, it wasn't the Britain of trains, Absolute nonsense, right? Britain was not, the British Empire was a terrible force for bad in the world. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The Chagos Islands story is look at actually what happened in the Chagos Islands. 1780s, Britain gets involved, 1790s, and they start to the first inhabitants. They say the first inhabitants, they probably killed a few people because that tends to what happens when they take over islands. First it's the Portuguese. Portuguese always involved. Hey. Britain takes over, and it's slavery. They use it for plantation. They take enslaved Africans from the mainland, and it's plantation labor, right? There was slavery on the African continent. That's the other thing about historically, there was slavery on the African continent. Europeans wanted slavery much more broadly on the African continent, but it was our resistance that stopped that. Our resistance that said you cannot have slavery on the African continent. But on these islands, so Cape Verde is another example where Portuguese enslaved people on the islands. Chagos Islands in Mauritius, they could enslave people because it's a small, it's 800 miles away from the mainland, so the resistance can't really reach that far. So Chagos Islands it's slavery, right? It's slave labor. Slave labor that goes on until 1840. Remember, the British slavery in the British Empire is supposed to end in 1834. That's nonsense because they do. But slavery continues in Mauritius until 1840. So by 1838, it's been abolished around the world. But Chagos Island still 1840, so it still carries on. They want to, they want to try and keep using plantation labor. Not that profitable for the UK. So it stays a colony. People there, a few thousand people live there. And then in the 60s, 70s, guess what they decide? They decide they want to put a military base there. US and the UK says we want a military base on the Chagos Islands. But guess what they do? They just get rid of the people. They kick out 2,000 to 3,000 people, just get taken off the land. Say, you got to go somewhere else. Some end up in Britain, some end up in Mauritius. But they just evacuated people. They time to go. See ya. This has been a massive contention of people wanting to go back. People wanting to go back to the islands. People wanting to go back to their homeland, etc., etc., etc. And this has wrangled on for years and years and years and years and years. And now finally, it made this decision. We're going to step back. We're British, aren't we wonderful? Blah 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 blah. We'll do it in a nice, polite way. I mean, this is central. This is the idea that there's somehow something positive that people could take out is insane. The idea that the right wing are mad about this. Oh, we're giving up the empire. No. You could just laugh at it and say, well, actually, look, this just shows that Britain's influence is gone. This just shows what a nonsense sense we are now. This just shows the. But actually, no, we shouldn't do that. Again, we seem to look at empire, decline of empire in the wrong way. The British Empire declined, but still kept the power. Chagos Islands is a perfect example. And when we think about the British Empire, we have to think about the British Empire in much more serious ways, right? The British Empire was not just some benign thing. It was not just some good and bad thing, right? It was not just something we can just, Interestingly, we've gone from thinking about the empire historically was taught, like early on, it was taught as though the British Empire was positive, was great, was wonderful. Now, then it was not talked about. Now we're kind of in this ambivalent, is it not? I'll go back to Ferguson's book. Ferguson makes this argument, look, British Empire, there were some bad things happened, but generally good, railways, industry, and really importantly, he says the British Empire is the empire that defeated the Nazis. So when the Nazis came up, the worst empire, the terrible people in history came up, the British Empire defeated the Nazis. And so therefore, any bad things that it did really don't matter because, got rid of the Nazis, so it must be good, right? When it was the British Empire that did this. And it is so stupid that I don't even know what to say. Sometimes you're like, what kind of an argument is that? And so the piece of history that I was taking a long time to get to because I wanted to kind of lay out the Chagos Islands that I wanted to talk about was this, that we actually, when we think about the British Empire, we have to think about. I was on Good Morning Britain years ago, and Piers Morgan couldn't understand when I said to him, the British Empire was worse than the Nazis. The British Empire was worse than the Nazis. That is fundamentally, objectively true. I wasn't just trying to put it out there to be. That was an objective reality, right? That's how we think about the British Empire. The British Empire was awful. The Nazis did some great things, right? They built roads, the Autobahn. Ooh, great. First motorways. What are we going to celebrate? We celebrate the Nazis? Like, Nazi propaganda. Media, the way that things, that's Goebbels, man. Like, what, we supposed to celebrate the Nazis now? Don't be ridiculous, nonsense. Look, the supposedly progress that the British Empire may have helped to bring into the world on the backs of hundreds of millions of black and brown people does not make it a novel good, right? Utterly nonsensical. And again, this idea, we have to understand worse than Nazis. And why do I say that? And why is it objectively true? So, it's very, very, very clear. British Empire lasts for far longer. We're talking century. British Empire, you could trace it back. Slavery, right? Slavery. If you go all the way back to slavery, that starts in England gets involved in slavery in the 16th century, right? First slave ship sent out by Queen Elizabeth, slave ship Jesus. That's not a joke, it's actually true. Like you hear that hip hop songs, it's actually true. The first English slave ship was called Jesus. So if you take it from there and say actually what empire, the expansion out, starting to build then starting to then colonize is like 17th into the 17th century. Height is the 18th century into the 19th century, 20th century. So actually, height of the actual formal empire probably the 19th century, 20th century, and then 20th century decline. 21st century you could say still carrying on, but let's just cap it at 60s, 70s, 80s. You cap it at the 60s, 70s, 80s, where you have most of the empire is formally declined. That's hundreds of years of history, right? That includes some of the worst atrocities ever committed. Slavery. Just take slavery. Royal African Company, the monopoly company, the first monopoly company that's of the British Crown, is the company that enslaved the most Africans of all companies, right? At the height of the slave trade, Britain was the biggest slaving nation, right? I mean, slavery is in itself a genocide. I mean, if you take slavery broadly speaking, not just Britain, but slavery broadly speaking is responsible for the deaths of anywhere between, and the estimates are difficult, but anywhere between 20 and 100 million deaths. Right? Anywhere between, could be that, could be more than that, we don't know, right? And that's just actual deaths. Don't take into account, you have to take into account, one of the things to take into account with when we say impact is people who would have been alive had the empire, had it not happened. So slavery doesn't happen, it's way more than 100 million. You can't even count that, right? Slavery decimated Africa's population. In fact, Africa's population has not actually recovered. And Britain is a major contributor to that. One of the most contributors to that. So this is slavery alone. Slavery alone is a 300 years thing, which Britain was one of the key drivers in, is worse than the 6-year period. 6-year period of the war and the Holocaust, but go back for the Nazis, 30s, 13, 15, let's say 15 years. It's not, it's a shorter period of time. Let's be realistic. Empire was hundreds of years. Slavery by itself, hundreds of years. Nazis, short period of time. Did lots of damage, terrible. This is not a pro-Nazi propaganda. It's a totally awful. Holocaust is completely and utterly awful. But slavery is so expansive. It's so long. It's so many people just on slavery. That's just slavery, right? We haven't added in anything else, right? So let's take slavery. Then take colonialism, British colonialism, underdevelopment of Africa. Slavery is part of this, right? Part of that underdevelopment. Places like Nigeria, places like Ghana, places like Kenya. I mean, actual atrocities, places like Kenya, Zimbabwe, etc. South Africa. Actual atrocities, guns, murders, killings, deaths, famine, starvation, and then again, deaths from poverty due to that. Again, you're talking about just in Africa alone. It's going to be tens of millions, probably into the hundreds of millions, right? Take India. There's a paper came out about this, so there's actually academic research on this that came out that suggested in just a 40-year period, from I want to say 40-year period, but don't quote me on a 40-year period, but up to 1920, in India alone, it's by Jason Hinkle and the co-author, suggests that 165 million Indians died because of the British Empire. 165 million. Just in India. It's just India. No, it doesn't include slavery number, doesn't include African number, doesn't include the rest of Asia, doesn't include anywhere else. Mauritius. I mean, we're literally talking about hundreds of millions. It is undoubtedly true that the British Empire spanned centuries and killed hundreds of millions of black and brown people. Hundreds of millions. Not a few, not hundreds of millions. In the pursuit of empire, wealth, etc. So all this, and really importantly, that progress that we're supposed to be celebrating is built on those deaths. Those deaths are why that progress happens. And you want to celebrate, say it's a good thing? Yeah, go get out of here. Wait, there is no comparison. You cannot compare the Nazi Germany period to the British Empire, because it's so longer and it's so much more brutal and it's so much more catastrophic for the world. Bigger problem here, even in defeating the Nazis, Britain drew on the empire, drew on soldiers, people, resources in Asia, in Africa, right? Front lines, about 2 million Africans died in the war. Served in the war, about 1 million died. Many millions in India, right? Famines in India caused Bengal famine 43. They could have solved the famine, but what did they do? They diverted, Churchill diverted food to the soldiers. So actually, even in the commission of beating the Nazis, is not this big evil, big bad evil. We took the deaths of millions and millions of black and brown people. Like, you literally cannot compare the two. Comparing Nazi Germany to the British Empire is totally ridiculous. Totally and utterly ridiculous. One is the long hundreds of millions. One is terrible, but a short-lived period, which was absolutely awful, absolutely horrendous. and also point out has ended. The other thing with the Nazi Germany ended. It was a period of time that has ended. The British Empire, I tell you right now, has not really ended. It carries on. The consequences of it carry on today, in deaths, in the world that exists, in continued poverty and starvation in parts of the world. It continues today, right? So you cannot compare a discrete historical terrible event with a centuries long thing, which has taken untold lives. But even more than that, the idea that the Nazi Germany is somehow separate from the British Empire, that's so historically stupid, I don't know what to say. Like, there's a book by Zygmunt Bauman who talks about, it's called Modernity and Holocaust, and in there he says that we have this idea that the Nazis are somehow not modern, right? They're somehow anti-modern because of all the terrible things, the way they killed, this anti-modern. But actually it's not true, right? Without what we call modernity, the process of industrialization, the process of science, the process of racialization, which comes into that, etc., you can't have the Nazis. The Nazis could only exist in this system created by Western capitalism, right? One, technology. To kill 6 million people in a few years is actually very difficult, right? So you need scientific technology, scientific rationality, scientific bureaucracy to do it. That comes from Western so-called modernity. Right? The idea of race. Now, what do the Nazis do? They racialize the Jews. They look, Jews are not people, they are untermenschen, underhumans, not subhuman. Where does that idea come from? That is the very idea that is the heart of the British Empire. That black and brown people are not really people, are subhuman, right? And it's that very same technology, actual technology, race science, which was just science back in the day, that is used to prove the Jews are not really people, right? That is used to racialize them. So that science and race, industry, the industrial slaughter of people, you can't do the Holocaust. It's not possible, right? Ideas that the only difference in the ideas in the Holocaust is that they were attached to people who we now believe to be white. But the actual idea of there are inhuman races who can be disposed of, that is the foundation of the British Empire. That is what the British Empire is built on, right? The British Empire is built on that very premise, promoting that very premise, and the science and technology that leads to the racialization and the ultimate Holocaust of Jewish people is inextricably linked to the rise of the British Empire. Inextricably linked. I'm going to say inextricably linked to the rise of the British Empire, right? So one of the things that happens in the way that we talk about the Holocaust is just terrible in many, many ways, right? We completely ignore the fact that it's actually German colonialism in Southeast Africa, right? So in Tanzania, there's a massive massacre in Namibia of the Herero people. The Herero people are trying to get reparations. I mean, the Herero populations only just got back to where it would have been had the genocide not happened, right? So this genocide happens in early in 1904, 1905, 1906, of the Hama and Herero people, and that really lays the foundation for the genocide that happens later with Jewish people, right? Now, importantly, scientists, people like Eugene Fisher, who were working on this, who were taking hair samples and all that, guess who they were working with? British leading so-called scientists, right? UCL, University College London. Robert Pearson, whose Pearson is still the name of a test you do in psychology, by the way. Francis Galton, this idea of eugenics, racial hygiene, right? They were working together to craft these ideas about racial science, phrenology, like the idea that you can measure brain school and size, is that the very ideas that we're not human beings, that is fundamentally underpinned by the British Empire, by British Empire research, the British Empire rationality, by British Empire reason. There are connections between the scientists and the work and the politicians and all of them, right? And that is what feeds and leads to the Nazism. You can't have Nazism without the racism, which is at the heart of the British Empire. The two things are totally not really connected, right? The idea of empire, the idea of expansion. Hitler was massively complimentary about the British Empire. He actually wanted to model his invasion and use of Poland on the way to Britain had the Raj in India. Right? He saw what Britain had done and created the largest empire that the world has ever seen, 24% of the world's population, 24% of the world's landmass, and wanted to emulate it, but with the Aryan race. So these ideas from Hitler they're not foreign or alien to Britain and the British Empire. They take those ideas and they take them extreme. I can't even say they take it extreme because the British Empire was already extreme. They just take them and apply them to white people, apply them to Europe. So the fundamental principle of the British Empire is you can go and colonize anywhere else in the world, as long as it's not Europe, right? As long as it's not white people. So you can do whatever you want in Africa, Asia, around the world. But when it comes to Europe, you keep that away, right? So this is all that Hitler does really, is just takes that to the next step and says, well, no, look, Jews actually aren't really white, so we can exterminate them. Eastern Europeans, they're a bit backwards too, so we need to take them over. And wants to create this dominant, but just takes that idea and really takes the logic to its full extent. But the idea that these are separate is one of the worst ways you understand history, right? So no, the British Empire. The British Empire versus the Nazis is not good guy versus bad guy. It's bad guy versus bad guy, right? It's bad guy versus bad guy. It's really, really big bad guy versus really, really bad guy. And the British Empire wins, actually, because it has more, it is the bigger bad guy, right? It has controls large parts of the world, right? America is essentially an extension of the British Empire. Let's just be honest, right? In this framework of the West, right? Can draw on all this power, right? So why America comes into the war and is massively important in the war, but America is the production of the British Empire, genocide of the Americans, slavery of Africans, continued colonialism, industry development. America is just the British Empire on steroids in America. It's an adjunct, it's an offshoot of the British Empire. So America, but the British Empire and the West and the Allies are able to win because of Africa, Asia, America, the empire. Because of colonial dispossession. So you cannot celebrate this. It's not something to celebrate. Like you celebrate, we created this thing. I say we. My family was part of the people who died in this, so I won't say we. But we created this monster that created another monster, and then the monster beats the smaller monster. And we're supposed to celebrate? Get out of here, man. British Empire is not. There should be no ever be a debate, discussion about whether the British Empire was a force for good. The British Empire is definitely worse, without doubt, objectively true, worse than the Nazis. Its impact on the world was worse than the Nazis. And in many ways, it actually produced Nazi Germany. Without the British, one thing I will promise you, 100% promise you, without the British Empire, the Nazis would not have happened. It wouldn't happen. Hitler's Reich does not happen. Does not exist. Does not happen. Nothing about that exists. Right? Not possible. British Empire, not just Britain, French Empire, Spanish Empire, all these Western empires are massive. Portuguese Empire, hugely culpable in doing that, in creating that. But they produced Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany is just another empire, right? The beginning of another empire from the West, with the same principles, with the same technology, with the same ideas, with the same logic, exactly the same, right? So that is your if you want a Black Employment Month, a nugget to leave you with for Black Employment Month. It really is that one, right? There should be no pride in the empire. And the fact that it's being dismantled, the fact that it's now starting to, Chagos Islands return, these are all positive things. But the bigger point I would stress here, and again, why I say worse than the Nazis, Britain, empire, it continues. It has not ended. Our lives are still being shaped. Our lives are still being taken. Our lives are still being dominated by the very same framework the British Empire put in, right? Malcolm talks about benevolent colonialism, talks about how Europe basically passes the ball to America and America becomes dominant. But it's the same system. It's not different, right? Britain just had the foresight to step back and say, let's look like the good guy here. Let's look like we're doing something positive. Let's look like we're, hand over. We didn't say hand over. If someone's handing you over something, then yeah, that's not what you need. You need to take that. We still need to take that. So understanding that history is not done. Chagos Islands hopefully reminds us that history is not done. They still own territory. They still have the power. They still have the economic, political, military power. It is still happening and it's still taking lives. Still taking lives. Life expectancy in Nigeria today is 56 years old. That is because of the continuing legacy of the British Empire. People are still dying in huge numbers. More people die from starvation in India today than they died before, right? From poverty. It's not famine, but it's poverty. Poverty kills millions of people because of the legacies and continued presence of the British Empire. So not only is it worse then, it's still going on. And the history is now, and if we're going to have to deal with the reality of it, the brutality, and the continued brutality of it today. That's the challenge of Black Employment Month. How do we actually end the legacy of the British Empire? Now, today. In very real ways. That's the challenge. That's not about DEI. That's not about diversity. It's not about getting Kemi Badenoch to be a prime minister. That's about fundamental revolutionary change. And I told you before, revolution here is the only solution. Anyway, I am going to stop ranting, and we're going to have After the break, we're going to have the interview of Yomi Adegoke. Really happy to get. I'm glad she'd give us the time. The book, The List, fantastic book. Please do go read the book, listen to the book, Kindle the book, whatever it is you want to do with the book. Please do read The List. Excellent piece of work. If you are watching on YouTube, go find, listen to the link anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find my interview with Yomi Adegoke. Please do have a happy Black Employment Month as we continue to go throughout the festivities.